Getting started with GB Pro EX and the AGP3000. This video will give you a quick tour of what you need to get started with GB Pro EX and the AGP3000 series HMI. It will take you through installing GB Pro EX, preparing your AGP3000 for the first download, take you through the GB Pro EX editor, project communication and setup, how to download your project and test communications, and how to use basic objects like switches, lamps, data displays and a keypad input display. We'll also take you through making a simple alarm display for your panel. To get started, you will need your GB Pro EX CD and serial number found on the label on the back. In addition, you will need your Pro-face AGP3000 or AST3000 panel with its appropriate power supply. If you're unsure about the model AGP that you have, check the label on the back and it will tell you, like in this case, AGP3200-T1-24, showing you have a 3.8 inch panel with a TFT display and a DC 24 volt power supply. If you're planning to download through your USB port or your panel is not equipped with an Ethernet port that can be used for downloading, you also need the USB download cable, CA3 USB CB01. Make sure you reboot your PC after you install GB Pro EX to ensure that the USB download cable driver functions properly. Lastly, you will need your PLC, a drive, inverter, temperature controller, or any other supported connectable device with its appropriate communication cable. Refer to the Help Device PLC manual that you can find in GB Pro EX for details about supported drivers, its communication cables, and the specific CPUs and settings used. To install GB Pro EX, you will need to put the CD in your PC, and auto run will make sure you see the setup menu. Next, make sure you have your CD handy with its serial number label, and click on the web registration button on the setup menu. You will see a pop-up window and you'll have to click the button with the link to the Pro-face America website. Make sure you have an internet connection available for this. You need to go through the web registration process to obtain the key code necessary to install GB Pro EX. After you receive your email with the key code for your serial number, click the GB Pro EX button to start your software installation and follow the on-screen instructions. When GB Pro EX installation is finished, make sure you reboot your PC to make sure the USB download cable driver is properly recognized. Next, we will have to prepare the AGP3000. And the first thing to check is the power supply that you need. Check the back of your unit and locate the power connector. Refer to the installation guide that you will find in the box of your AGP3000 for the proper power supply and the proper wiring. After powering up your AGP3000 or AST3000 for the first time, you will see the initial start mode menu. Click the Ethernet setup button and enter an IP address, a subnet mask, and optional the gateway. Port 8000 is what is the start port for GB Pro EX, so you could leave that as it is. If you're unsure what information to enter, contact your IT professional. If you're using the download cable for your project transfer, make sure you connect your USB download cable to one of the USB ports on the AGP. Connect the other end of the cable to your PC and finally connect the PLC communication cable between your AGP and your PLC. See the device PLC connection manual if you need details about your setup or supported devices. When you are done with your preparation, click the GB Pro EX icon found on your desktop to open the GB Pro EX software. In our case, we will not check for online update service, and we will go straight into creating a new project. The first thing you will have to do is select the hardware that you're going to use. You would pick the GP3000 series. In our case, for this example, a GP3200. And as we saw on the label on the back of the unit, an AGP3200T. All Pro-face panels can be mounted landscape or portrait mode. And we'll go for landscape, which is the standard mode to install. Next, you will have to pick the driver that you're going to communicate to. For our example, we will use the Rockwell Ethernet IP driver. Please note that the last chosen drivers will always be available for a quick link, and a link to the manual is available right here. After selecting your PLC, we will have to set up the communication settings. So click the communication settings button and you are taken to the system setup. Before we continue with the device PLC setup, notice that GB Pro EX contains workspaces. In this example, we'll have a screen list on one side and a property list on the other side. You can put these two together by dragging the title bar, and you can rearrange your screen to display the tabs that you think you need. Important ones to have available are the Properties one, the System Settings tab, and the Screen List tab. When we go to Communication Settings, we are automatically placed in the System Settings tab, and the system settings are displayed in the main editor window. If you're missing any workspaces that you see in this example, go to View, Workspace, and enable or disable any workspace that you want to show in addition. We are now at the device PLC setup step, and you can see the driver we selected, the version number that you have installed on your PC, and the communication method that we're going to use. Click the device PLC 1 link to display the individual properties for your specific driver. Note that for 6-inch and 3.8-inch panels, 2 separate drivers are supported. Any of the larger Pro-face panels can support up to 4 different device and PLC drivers. Each driver can then support multiple PLCs, which you will see in the allowable number of PLC devices. So our driver on Ethernet can support up to 16 individual CPUs connected. We will use one, and for easy recognition we will first enter a name that allows us to identify easily the PLC that we're connecting to. Next, click the individual PLC settings button and notice that this interface may be different for any PLC that you connect to. In our example, it is for a MicroLogic series PLC on Ethernet. In this case, I will have to enter the correct IP address for the PLC we're connecting to, and that finishes our PLC setup. The next thing to do is to create a simple screen to see if our communication is correct. So click the screen editor and go to your screen list. If you don't see the screen list workspace, go to View and select the screen list workspace from the list. Once you're in your screen list workspace, double-click the first base screen. A base screen is what your operator will see. A pop-up window you will find in Windows screens. For this example, we will go for a new base screen. We'll pick a data display, place it on the screen, and double-click the object to open it. What we're going to do is put a single register that we know exists in the PLC and place it on the screen, transfer the project, just to check our communication settings. This will avoid you having to write your entire project and missing your PLC setup by a single register. This is much easier to troubleshoot. We're going to enter an address for the PLC that is connected, and there are 2 ways to do this. The first way is to type into the monitor word address Second option is to click on the calculator icon to bring up the input address dialog. Pick the PLC you want to connect to from the drop-down list and notice that the name you gave your PLC is shown in there. Pick the device that you want to view and pick the address. In our case we will stick with N70. Click enter and click OK to make your changes. Since we are testing communication, we're now going to save the project and go to the Transfer Projects tab. Notice that the editor shuts down and the transfer tool will be displayed. The first thing you will have to do in the transfer tool is make sure that you have the appropriate download method selected. To do so, pick the Transfer Settings button and choose either USB or local area network if you want to connect for the first time using Ethernet. We will use the USB connection and we can click Send Project to start transferring. Notice that the first download is always a little bit slower than any consecutive download because the first download will install the runtime, the operating system and your project file including drivers in your AGP for the first time. Any consecutive download will check for a runtime update, a driver update and project updates. So if you made an upgrade to your GB Pro EX software, it will automatically be reflected in your AGP. When download finishes, you see the transfer complete window and your AGP reboots. You can now close the Send Project window and close the transfer tool to return to GB Pro EX. Take a look at your AGP and make sure that you do not see a communication error message down the bottom of the screen and that all objects that you made are actually displayed. If there is an error message displayed, make sure you review your addressing and if necessary go to System Settings, Device PLC and check your PLC communication setup. If you need further help, you can also refer to the Help Device PLC manual. For error messages, the Maintenance and Troubleshooting manual is available that will list all of the error codes that you might see at the bottom of your screen with an explanation on how to troubleshoot and fix these. If your communication setup is successful, you can return to your base screen by clicking the screen list, your base screen, and notice that we have a single tab at the top of the screen that tells us what base screen we're on. I'm going to right click and delete this object so that we can start making our program now that we know that communication works. The first thing we're going to do is create a simple switch and notice that the switch preview will show up when you hover your mouse over the switch. The button next to it allows you to change the default look and feel of any of the images that you have for your switch. This allows you to very quickly set a default object that you always use for any new switch that you create. After placing the switch on the screen, double-click the switch to open its features and notice that the list that you see here can contain up to 16 individual actions. Those actions can be a bit switch, a word switch, a screen change, switches that do special functions on various objects GB Pro EX like the alarm system, data display, recipe system, and a display selector switch that allows you to cycle through multiple bit settings. To set up the first switch, click the switch and as we've seen before, either type your address or click the calculator icon to select a different setting. Click the bit action that you want to perform, and if you want to add another switch, click the Add button and add another function. If the next switch should be a bit switch, click your action and change the bit switch. So you don't have to delete a new switch, you can just change its settings right there. If we go for a word switch, I'm going to change this address. And we want to have an addition switch. What we are going to do with this switch is take the value in register N710 and add 10 to that same register every time we click the switch. If we want to hold the switch and add 10 every time, we can click the continuous add. Now we can hold the switch and the register value will be incremented by 10. To create a lamp that will show us the status of our switch, place the lamp on the screen, open it, and if you don't like the shape of the lamp that was chosen by default, click the select shape and notice that you have an on and an off state for the lamp. Click the state you want to change, click open and browse through any of our shape files to pick the new default shape. If you want to match the on and the off state, select the shape that you want to use as base, click auto, and the opposite state will take the same image. Change the address of the lamp that you want to review and optionally add an on and an off state label. Once you have your switch and your lamp working, you can either download your project or run it in simulation mode. Before we run simulation mode, we will go back and take a quick look at the switch that we set up. Our bit switch, looking at our properties workspace, will now do a bit momentary on bit B30. Our word action switch will add to N710. Our lamp will respond to the B307 switch, and we can add a data display to respond to the word set. I can open the data display now to change its attributes. I can also use the properties window as a shortcut to quickly change the address that I want to have displayed. For a data display, you have the option to do numeric value display, a text display showing ASCII characters, date and time, statistical data comparing multiple registers, and show a limit value, which will show you the minimum and maximum output that you set up for a keypad input. To change the display settings, choose any font that you want to use. The stroke font typically has the nicest results when you start scaling your data, and place data display. To test functionality, you don't have to download at this point. You can go to Project, Simulation, and watch your screen in action. A single click will have a bit momentary as we set up, and continuous add will add the value to this register when you hold the key through our continuous action switch. If you want to make a quick screen copy for documentation, you can click Save Screen. Otherwise, you can exit simulation now that you know that your buttons work. If we want to change the value in this register, not through the switch but through a keypad input, we select another data display. Place it on the screen and double click it. Change your word address to whatever setting you want to use and click the Allow Input to create a numeric data display with pop-up keypad. Once you click the Allow Input, the Data Entry tab becomes available. When set to touch means when you click the data display on the screen, pop-up keypad will be displayed. You can enable the pop-up keypad here. This pop-up keypad entry will now double as a data display and a keypad entry device. That means that if the keypad is not active, the data will be displayed as it is currently in the PLC. If you click the keypad, the pop-up keypad will display and you can enter a new value and write it to the PLC. To quickly take a look at what addresses you used so far on your screen, you can go to View, Workspace, and select the Address workspace. The Address workspace will show you for device addresses, symbols, bit addresses, and word addresses, which values are used in your display. So any item in red is used on the screen, and I can take a look down the bottom here to see where they are used. The same thing goes for the next N710, and I can see the items where they are used. I can click the link and quickly identify which object used this simple address. If I want to change this address, I can pick a different address, drag it onto the screen, and pick the appropriate property to assign it to. I can repeat that for any object, which will make for very quick programming. Now all of our addresses have been changed to N711. Make sure that the word switch for your add data changes values as well. And save your project when you're ready to download. You can now transfer your project and see if your switches work. What we will do now is create a simple alarm system to get you started. We go back to our screen list and we're going to add another screen specifically for our alarms. Right click the base screen and click New Screen. Make sure that it's set to screens of type base, an available screen number, and add title for your screen. We now have two base screens configured, and notice that when creating a new screen, both will be displayed at the top of your editor window. To switch between screens 1 and 2, we will go to screen 1 and select another switch. Double click your switch and select the screen change option. This switch should go to base screen number 2, and we're going to add a label here. Next, we will right click and copy this switch and go to our second base screen. Use Ctrl V or right click and click paste to paste the button in the exact location where it was on the other. We will open the switch up by double clicking it, make it go back to base screen 1. As an alternative, we could pick previous screen, go to our label, and change the title. We can now jump between our two base screens. To set up a simple alarm system, we will first have to set up our alarm messages. To do so, use the alarm icon or use the Common Settings Alarm System. The first thing you will have to set up is which block out of 8 you will use. A block is an individual list of alarms. This means that if you have multiple PLCs or different portions of the line for which you want to separate your alarms in the list, you could pick multiple blocks. In our example, we will use only block 1 and as indicated will stay with the default of saving, backing up 128 historic, log and active alarms. If I click my block 1, I can now start entering my bit addresses. Notice that I can type in this box, or I can again use the same pop-up trigger and pick the bits that I want to use for my alarm messages. I can change the display device here. My trigger condition is the state of the bit in which the alarm will be active, and I can add an alarm message. You are free to pick any address from different values, different states in your PLC. You can alter trigger conditions if you want. And add your alarm messages. After setting up some alarm messages, you can return to your base screen, either by clicking the screen list and double clicking your screen, or by locating the tab for the screen you want to go to at the top of your screen. Now that we have alarm messages, we have to have an alarm display. To create an alarm display, click the alarm button, go to Parts, click Alarm, and place the object on your screen. To change the settings for your alarm system, double click the part, use the Show History setting, and display the block that you want to see. Notice that you can pick the display mode for active, history or log. History and log contain different settings for your historic alarms. Active will only display alarms that are currently active. We can pick the number of rows that we want to display and the row where we want to start. Go to our item setup and select the data columns that we want to display. Since this is an active alarm display, any recovered message will not be displayed. That will show up in the log or the history settings. So in this case, we will take away the recovered button to make some room. Set the position for the date, the time, the length where you want to show them. And change your color settings. A triggered alarm typically be a red display. This just happened. An acknowledged alarm, someone noticed. And a recovered alarm went away. The next thing you can set up is the font type to use for your alarm display. Stroke font typically saves you the most space on your screen, and the English stroke font is standard included with a new download, so you can click OK with the font warning message. The last thing you want to do is set up your switches. Click the start and end switch as a precaution so that you cannot accidentally acknowledge the switch. Click any other switch that you want to have displayed, like a move up, move down, and an acknowledge button, and click OK. If you want to change the position of your switches, click the alarm object to select the entire group, and then select the switch that you want to move and place it wherever you want it to go. If you want to change any setting in your alarm system, simply double click it or use the properties window to change the properties. To add a title to your screen, you can add a simple text label by going to the drawing toolbar, clicking text, and clicking the text in the screen where you want to have it displayed. Notice that the icon does not change from the text add mode. So unless you right click or click escape, you will create another text setting. Right click to go back to the normal cursor mode. And click the text that you want to have displayed. Double click the text to open its settings, its color, the font size used, the font type used, and enter your new text. Place your text, save screens, and you're now ready to download to your AGP by going to your Transfer Projects tab and clicking Send Project. When the download finishes, you have a working project with a simple alarm system, some basic switches that should be communicating to your PLC. If you have any questions about features in GB Pro EX, use the Help reference manual for general questions about the editor or any information regarding functions and objects that you can use on the screen. Use the Device PLC Connection manual to determine your initial setup for your PLC or device, along with its cables and settings. Select the Hardware manual to see the manuals for your AGP or AL3000 series panel, and use the Maintenance and Troubleshooting manual if you have an error code displayed or an error message displayed in the editor or on the AGP itself. That concludes this video, taking you through the basics of AGP 3000 and Pro-face GB Pro EX.